Thanks for watching The Thought Criminals, named after the resistance to the totalitarian thought police of George Orwell's 1984, which we now refer to as being woke. I'm your host, Rachel Alexander. I'm a weekly contributor to Townhall and other sites, and the editor of Intellectual Conservative. And this is my mall, Ralph Benko, who worked in or with the Reagan, W. Bush, and Trump White Houses. He's a weekly columnist for Newsmax, co-author of the Capitalist Manifesto, and co-founder and executive chairman of the 187,000-member Capitalist League Facebook group. Well, today we're going to live up to our title, and we are going to talk about wokeism. We're going to talk about cancel culture, which is an article Ralph wrote. It's discussing how cancel culture is actually hurting the left more than it's hurting the right. And we're also going to talk about a column I wrote on how there's this new phenomenon of billionaires coming into races, declaring that they are supporting the best American First candidate, labeling other staunch conservatives like Mark Brnovich here in Arizona a rhino. And then they're able to, help their candidate win the primary, but then their candidate's going to go down in flames in the general election, which is exactly what is going to happen in this election.
And I've coined a name for this phenomena, Rachel, inspired by you. Racism. Because they enter the race by destroying the true conservative and sit out there and carpet bomb the true conservatives, and then they go on to lose the race to the liberal Democrat. So this is a new form of racism, and I think we should we should call it out.
And this one doubly applies because, like Masters, many people believe he is racist because he came out and said it's Black people, frankly, who are responsible for gun violence deaths. And as we've discussed before, you can't get away with saying things like that. You needlessly turn off minorities to the Republican Party. You can look at the stats all you want. And while it's true that Blacks commit a larger proportion of crimes like that than whites, you can't just blatantly say things like that. So
Rachel, it's worse than that. And I've maintained a grudging respect for Blake Masters up until he said this. Look, he's a successful venture capitalist. He's a successful.
He's done nothing his whole life but work for billionaire Peter Thiel. That's what qualifies.
I'm the chairman of the Capitalist League. I like self-made billionaires like Peter Thiel. Okay, so that doesn't disqualify me. But the way he framed this about people, about Blacks, about people of color, it's a tip-off. Because guess who the victim of the violence, the major demographic who's the victim of this same violence? Black people. So instead of saying Blacks are the perpetrators, he could have even more accurately said Blacks are the victims, and therefore they should be coming over to us who want to protect them with good law and order and with good policing, and with the right to keep and bear arms. Okay, so he could have said Blacks are the prime victims of gun violence, which is true, but instead he said Blacks are the main perpetrators of gun violence, which, even if it's true, it is so insensitive and so wrong to be, in my opinion, to be hippie punching Blacks who have a natural home in the Republican Party, by the way. The Democratic Party was the pro-slavery party. Abraham Lincoln invented the Republican Party to fight to free the slaves. And what we have is a long history of Republicans fighting for civil rights while Democrats fought for slavery. So why doesn't he get in line with the culture and history of the Republican Party and push it toward
Just be accurate. That's all I ask. All these gains that Trump made to bring Blacks over to the Republican Party are now going to be reversed because Democrat Senator Mark Kelly, who Blake is going to be facing, is just going to run ads nonstop showing that remark. And then he's going to show the two big white supremacist endorsements that Masters has now gotten. And anybody, you put that together, together, you put together all the stuff he said, regarding Jews that people think is offensive. He said offensive things about people's ages. And as a woman, everything about that guy's demeanor comes across to me, and I'm a conservative woman, I'm not even a moderate woman, comes across to me as very offensive. And so what are all the moderate women, the swing voters out there who you need to get gonna think? I predict he is going to be cremated in the general election. And if people are going to go down.
If nominated, Lehman is the more plausible nominee, given the fact that the $2 billion candidates, not that Masters isn't a billionaire, but he's got a billionaire backing. Lehman is a legitimately self-made billionaire. And as the chairman of the Capitalist League, I like self-made billionaires, and Peter Thiel I like very much as a self-made billionaire. So, but the fact is, Blake Masters is no Peter Thiel, and he should have come to you on day one to say, Rachel, give me the narrative. How should I run this race?
Well, that wouldn't work because I'm a longtime friend of Mark Brnovich, so I'm not going to give him in.
I know, but you're also a very generous soul who would have helped steer his footsteps in the paths of righteousness.
Well, away from this Senate race, maybe trying to clean up his record online so he doesn't have all these offensive statements that he said in the past. I mean, I don't think you can get around his offensive statements. I think that somebody like that is too damaged.
Okay, I hear you. So you wrote a lovely column this week talking about the propensity of these carpetbagging billionaires to come in and call perfectly authentic conservatives, people who have not just, people like Mark Brnovich, who've not just talked the talk, but have walked the walk under grace, under fire. When it wasn't easy, they stood up for conservative principles. Now, as you know, just to be clear, Mark is somewhat to my left because because the right conservative position is to be very generous to immigrants. Okay, so he's too left-wing hardline against illegal immigration for my tastes. Okay, but Mark Brnovich is a man of integrity and a true conservative. I stipulate that the evidence is there by thought, word, and deed. Okay, and frankly, if it wasn't just politics, which it is, I'm sorry to say, it would be defamation. The things that Blake Masters is saying about Mark Brnovich, accusing him to be being a Republican in name only, okay, would be slander, would be libel, would be words that you never heard in the Bible. So the fact is that I want someone who will lead with integrity and lead with dignity, and not be making up fake stories about true conservatives like Mark Brnovich. And so shame on Blake Masters. He could have run with distinction. He's a very smart, talented, accomplished man.
I don't even actually think he's that bright. I think his dad got him into Stanford Law School because of the unwise, careless statements he said. I mean, he grew up as a millennial in this era where everybody's watching your tweets. So the fact that he cannot control himself, I question that. And I want to point out, my article didn't just address tried and true solid conservatives with records being smeared this way. You've also got people like here in Arizona, gubernatorial candidate Carrie Lake, who is being portrayed as a RINO by her real RINO opponent, who is married to a billionaire. So this Karen Taylor Robson, who has the worst record, you can read about it in my column, which I will put at the bottom of this video. She's calling Carrie a RINO because back in the early 2010s, when Carrie Lake was in mainstream media as a news anchor and she was a Democrat, she made 2 small donations to Barack Obama and John Kerry. And because of that, Karen Taylor Robson is lying and calling her a RINO. The reality is when Karen Taylor Robson has done all these things, like vote for subsidized tuition for illegal immigrants, vote against pro-life laws, when she's done all that, it's been in the last few years when she was a Republican. Oh, and it hasn't even come out yet until this last few days, but Karen Taylor Robson also has bundled money and donated to a lot of prominent Democrats. this Congressman Ruben Gallego here in Arizona, I think about 2 years ago, she was bundling money for him as a Democrat. But it's unfortunate. Sheila Robeson is surging in the polls. It's going to be a very close primary because she's been able to get these smears out due to her husband's money.
Well, it's really scandalous the way true conservatives like Mark Brnovich, like Kelly Lake, who have a long, uncontrovertible track record of courageous conservative action, are being slurred by people who have fat checking accounts. And it's too bad. That's just politics, I guess. But God bless you
For us capitalists, it's tricky because I am all in favor of, we should be allowed to spend money on elections, and you are too. I mean, I think Citizens United was correctly decided.
I totally agree. And we're buddies with Floyd Brown, who was Citizens United, and I am a acolyte of Saul Alinsky, who totally believed in Citizens United before there was a Citizens United. So I'm glad to see you.
Came out of left field.
No, he came out of right field. Stop slurring Saul Alinsky as a left winger. He was not. He was Tea Party before there was Tea Party.
Well, I think, I've always said this, capitalism works best with Judeo-Christian morals. And so I feel like there are going to be some excesses in capitalism that aren't perfect. Nothing on earth is ever going to be perfect. So of course, we're going to have some negative aspects to capitalism that we just have to deal with. And in my opinion, I think the best way to deal with this is things like Sunlight, where we just come on shows like this and we expose the real record of these, billionaires and for the pro-choice ones who are funding Blake Masters. I mean, talk about Blake.
Wait. Please don't imply that Peter is pro-choice.
No. The Winkleman twins.
Okay,
they are supporting Masters and they are pro-choice.
Okay, that's fine. But I just wanted to make sure that you were not leaving a false implication that Peter Thiel is.
No. Masters is funded by 4 billionaires at least that we know of. So he's going to be beholden to those interests. And, I find it disturbing that he convinced a friend in the 1990s to become pro-choice instead of pro-life. That's very disturbing. And I've seen no evidence that he's changed his mind. When Roe versus Wade was reversed, he was strangely quiet.
Yeah, I don't hold against, I don't hold what people did 25 years ago against them, because people can mature. However, the fact that he's not being clear about it now is something that I haven't followed the intricacies of the race, so I'm relying on you. If he has not basically said that Roe was wrongly decided, which clearly it was, because the Constitution protects persons from the Fifth Amendment protects persons from prevents the taking of a person's life without due process of law. Okay, and the fact is that most Americans, as I read the polls, believe that an unborn child, by the time they're viable at least, is a person, and therefore the Constitution protects their lives from being taken without due process. Due process would be going before a tribunal that said, this is threatening my life, the life of the mother, and therefore the life of the mother is takes priority over the life of the unborn child, which, by the way, everybody believes. Catholics who believe in personhood from conception, Jews like me who believe that personhood adheres at the 41st day of pregnancy, Lutherans who believe that personhood adheres at viability. Okay, this is across the board, not just religiously, but depending upon how, if you frame the question with integrity, most Americans do not believe that an unborn child, once they've reached approximately three to 4 months in gestation, should be allowed to be aborted for trivial reasons. So the fact is that this is the personhood of the unborn is what this pivots around. And I know, based upon things you've told me, that Brnovich is pro-life and reliably pro-life. He'll fight for pro-life. Okay, Blake Masters, I don't, like you said, all I'm getting is crickets. Maybe he said something. I don't want to be unfair to him. Okay. And I'll pick any Republican over any Democrat because I would like to see the Senate back in Republican hands, where it's marginally less threatening to our
Well,
liberty.
I'm not going to get into the weeds, and we need to move on and discuss wokeism. But I just want to point out that I firmly believe this is just going to be a repeat of a previous Senate election where Doug Ducey appointed Martha McSally, who nobody got excited about, and she lost the election in the general. So I believe it's the same thing. We didn't learn from a couple years ago. So we're just going to see another repeat of another bad Republican candidate that nobody wants. And so anyways, moving on. You wrote one of your best columns, I believe, Ralph, because you pointed out something that a lot of us on the right never think about. I've never thought about the extent that wokeism and cancel culture is actually hurting the left itself. So go ahead.
Yes, there was a long, fascinating article by a left-wing, an honest left-wing journalist, those they do exist, in an online publication called The Intercept. It was very long. It's hyperlinked in my article at Newsmax today on July 18th, in which I talk about how woke cult and cancel culture is annoying to us on the right. It does us injustices, but it's proving absolutely suicidal to the left. They've imposed a purity test on one another. And according to this article in The Intercept, called The Elephant in the Zoom, I really recommend that all of our, thousands and millions of listeners go read it for themselves. I was flabbergasted. Wokeism, all of the activist organizations on the left, from the Audubon Society to the ACLU to Black Lives Matters, you name it, he lists them all. According to their own leadership, they're paralyzed, absolutely paralyzed by internal insurgencies accusing them of not being woke enough. So they have achieved the purity test, and according to this article, which is well researched and very credible, they are now paralyzed within by the internal tumult and clash over whether their leadership is woke, or whether their mission is woke enough, whether their focus is, I guess it should be focus on the family, right, over there on the left. They have paralyzed themselves into a point of complete ineffectuality in the advocacy of their left-wing agenda. So I'm like, wow. I frequently read the journals of the left because I like to know what my enemies are up to. So I read the New Yorker, I read Mother Jones, I read Jacobin, I read the Atlantic, and here I came across this article in The Intercept talking about how being woke and being held up to woke standards has absolutely paralyzed the militant left wing in their advocacy. And I'm like, yay, because as you know, I'm an old fan of Saul Alinsky, who is often mistaken for a man of the left simply because he devoted his life to justice, which is a conservative value, but he was anti-big government. He carried concealed. He was pro-capitalism. And I was friends with his widow, Irene McGinnis, recently passed on about a year ago, to whom Rules for Radicals was dedicated, not Lucifer. That's a myth that right-wing nuts like you, Rachel, like to perpetrate, but you could look at the
that is semantics. Anybody can look that up and get the real story. Nice try, Ralph.
Yes, and I wish they would. And in fact, I wish they would all download a PDF or go to their books, Barnes and Noble, and buy a copy of Rules for Radical and read it.
You can see exactly how he addresses Lucifer in the beginning. I've got a copy. I did a book review of it.
He doesn't address Lucifer. It gives Lucifer an over-the-shoulder acknowledgement for having built his own empire. After
that's how you phrase it, an over-the-shoulder acknowledgement.
No, that's how Alinsky phrased it. Number one. Number two, it's an epigraph. It's not a dedication. And number three, it was the third epigraph after a quote from the great Jewish sage Rabbi Hillel, which was Saul, being an agnostic, not an atheist Jew, lived by. It's on his gravestone. Where there are no men, be thou a man. So it was a charge of moral courage, which he aspired to and he lived by. Then followed by a quote from Thomas Paine that he would not prostitute his soul, even if it meant that he would suffer the pangs of demons. It was strictly anti-demonic. And then he was a provocateur. He loved to trigger people, particularly big government people, and particularly dogmatists. And that's where he gave his over-the-shoulder acknowledgement to Lucifer, who, by the way, you're a Protestant, right? So you've heard of Martin Luther and you've heard of John Calvin, both of whose theologies I've dipped into and discovered that both of them say correctly that Lucifer and Satan are two different dudes. Lucifer is not Satan.
A long debate going back over that, and I, if I remember correctly, those two were actually in the minority. I'm definitely not a Calvinist. I mean, I respect his teachings, but that is not biblical doctrine. What John Calvin stated. So
no, I know. Nor are you a Lutheran, okay? But the fact is that biblical scholarship makes it and I'm a Jew, so we wrote the Bible. So pay attention. I'm giving you the straight dope.
You wrote half the Bible.
No, we wrote it. First of all, the Christian appendix to the Holy Scriptures is like teensy compared to the Bible, which is like 10 times longer than the Christian appendix.
Well, God was writing through the people who wrote the Bible. So if you really want to get technical.
Yeah, I do. So the point here is that Satan was the adversary in Jewish theology. He was not demonic. He was like the devil's advocate. Okay, and Lucifer was reference to a Babylonian king. I believe it's Babylonian. Don't hold me to it. Okay, who disgraced himself. Okay, Lucifer and Satan, two different dudes or critters or whatever you want to call them. And when just on the eve of Operation Barbarossa, when Hitler invaded Russia, he said to his aide, if Hitler invaded hell, I would at least say a kind word about the devil on the floor of the House of Commons. So, and that didn't make Winston Churchill a Satanist, okay? These guys were being provocative, that's all. Alinsky, who was studied and rejected by Hillary Clinton, and studied, and one of Alinsky's successors at the Industrial Areas Foundation tutored Barack Obama, and Barack Obama rejected him too. Okay, Alinsky came up with rules for radicals, and they're tactically brilliant. And rule 4 is hold your enemy up to their own book of rules, which they cannot possibly achieve. Okay, and that's a brilliant tactical move against your enemy. The left, the progressives, because there's a good left, which is the labor left and the ethnic left, but the progressives, who are the progs, who I call the trogs, okay, they are trying to hold their own tribe up to their own book of rules, and according to Alinsky, they're doing an own goal against their own team by trying to hold their own team up to their own book of rules, which, as Alinsky himself points out, is impossible. You can't live up to those ideals. So the fact is that they are prostituting Saul Alinsky to destroy the progressive movement, and it's working. So I say, bring it on.
I'm glad you're saying that, and I'm going to have to mull this over, because so far it seems like cancel culture has hurt conservatives the worst. I mean, I've been canceled twice.
I know.
So I'm not sure if I can see what you're saying. I do see increasing numbers of left-wing people being canceled. I can't believe when you've got people like Joe Rogan, who's never been a conservative. I mean, he's kind of been all over the place. I mean, he's big, but they're really going after him. And, so far, Spotify isn't caving in, but
they're not going to, because he's too big of they have too big of an investment in him. But there was a wonderful article in the Wall Street Journal talking about somebody who left the Center for American Progress to go to work for AEI, the American Enterprise Institute, which is a center-right institute, because the woke culture at the Center for American Progress was absolutely destroying his ability to be effective at making the world a better place. And by the way, as you know, I wrote a whole blog about this at thoughtcriminals.ning.com, our blog, which I'd like everybody who's listening to go read and go sign up for, so you can keep up to the minute on the crazy totalitarian woke cancel culture. But when I read this article at The Intercept, which you can find hyperlinked at my Newsmax article about the elephant in the Zoom, published today, July 18th, you'll get chapter and verse as to how woke culture is absolutely destroying the left. And
well,
so
and I like to point out, as a conservative journalist, that I am so glad I am on this side in this era, not the left, because those liberal journalists, every morning they get up and they think, okay, what conservative can I dig up dirt on and try to find bad things about them to make them look racist, and then make up a story about how they're racist or they're homophobic or blah, 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 blah. Like, this is the life when you are in a career like that. If you are in politics on the left, you don't get a right about issues normally like you would have 20 years ago. Now it's just all, who can I go after using this tactic and destroy? And I want to get one more thing in, because I know we need to wrap it up. But
one second, you've just made an important point, and I want to crystallize it. A very important point. They are not journalists. They are character assassins. And you put your finger right on it, Rachel. The fact that their franchise is to assassinate the characters of people who have the temerity to disagree with them, like George Washington, who they're attempting to take down now, for heaven's sakes, okay? These are not journalists, they're character assassins. So over to you, and then let's
and my next column is actually going to hit on a lot of this, but I wanted to point out that, you know, people like me, you know, a B-level writer, that Right Wing Watch, which is from People for the American Way, actually has a whole page listing things that I have done. This is to the extent that it's gone. And
right, they're stalkers. They're stalkers. They're stalkers. You know, and you're one of their victims. I'm slightly, to be perfectly candid here, I'm going to make a concession to the great wide world of our watchers. I'm slightly envious of you.
Oh, I think they have a page on you. You just only have like a couple items.
Yeah, I only have a couple of items. Compared to you, I am Mother Teresa. So I'm kind of envious about the fact that they've found you worthy of stalking and laid out some of your wonderful.
Oh, you know what, Ralph? I know you well enough. Wait till you get on their radar, because I see what you write, and you could be a gold mine for them, because you are very brave in what you say. So let me just get one more thing in. I just want to point out, when you're talking about these tactics, the Alinsky's tactics, you know, of destroying your enemy and holding them up to impossible standards.
Yes.
I just want to point out, when the left is coming after the right, they always try to hold us up to the standard of God. And right. and that is absolutely blasphemous, because, you know, the Bible says no man is perfect, no man is sinless. And if you try to, you know, act like you are, that's actually a sin. And so right. Nobody ever calls them out on this and says, well, guess what? You know, Ted Cruz might have said one sin. Well, that's okay. I mean, if you were trying to say that Ted Cruz can never make a mistake, that's so I don't understand why our side doesn't point that out more, but
well, read my column.
They don't follow Alinsky like you do.
Well, and Alinsky, in the service of the people controlling the government, which is what Saul Alinsky was all about, not the government controlling the people, which is what the progressives and the socialists are all about. So I don't care about defending the reputation of Saul Alinsky. Saul can defend himself, okay? But I'm trying to make this resource, this precious resource, available to my fellow conservatives, so that they can join us, you and me, in fighting for liberty and justice for all.
All right, well, that wraps it up, and tune in next week. I can tell you guys right now, my column next week is going to be why the left is the left, and it's not mental illness, but it is something to do with emotion. So thanks for watching, and tune in next week.
Thank you, Rachel. See you.